Flood. This effort was to remind citizens and newcomers to our community about how high the water actually got in the 2011 flood. This activity as an education piece also allows us to apply for community rating system points, which, as you know, if you get enough points, that impacts the flood insurance premiums to our community. So this will go towards the point system and allow us to continue to work on improved flood insurance premiums as we go forward. These signs are all across the city. These are the locations in and around where we put these signs. All signs have been installed except for the one over at the Bark Park, and of course that's because that area is under heavy construction at this point in time. And as soon as we can button that up, which may be for some time though, we'll put the sign up there as well so that we have some presence in that area. Just wanted to update you. I met with the Source River Joint Board within the last month or so to talk about the flood control project for the city. We've noticed a couple things that we just want to have a conversation about with them, and that is the pace of the project. While things are accelerating very nicely, in fact, things are going quite well with the projects. You're already aware of the bids that came in below engineer's estimate, which is nice. Some of that acceleration we're seeing churning through the finances a little bit more quickly than we'd anticipated. On the left here of the screen, you'll see the FY18 CIP and what the predictions were for expenditures against the new estimates. And you can see that we're running about $31 to $32 million ahead in the financing piece. That's going to have some impacts based on our financial models. And so I brought that to the attention of the Source River Joint Board, and also talk with them about the local share of funding and a need for us to work more aggressively to increase the amount of local share, and in particular local share from other jurisdictions. And then finally, local contracts and who's holding the contracts and who's going to own the infrastructure, and those kinds of things are also things that are important to discuss. So securing the state funding, the Source River Joint Board has done a very nice job with it. They've done a great job with the whole project, in fact. But there are some things that we do want to work through as it relates to some logistical components, and that being predominantly the financing piece. So while I was there, I talked with them about recommending a meeting between our City Council and the Source River Joint Board to maybe get a better handle and have a free discussion between those officials and yourself, and hammer out some of these details and kind of ensure that we're all on the same page as we move forward. So that would be my recommendation to you for your consideration going forward, is to meet with the Source River Joint Board at some meeting in the future. Home Sweet Home is finally, I shouldn't say finally relocated, it's the first of 2 moves. It has been moved generally across the street now and is awaiting its foundation, and then once the foundation is poured and cured, then the last steps, of course, to move the home back onto the foundation and then go about the restoration process. We did have to extend the timeline a few times due to some utility conflicts, also in addition to some rain, unexpected rain, which saturated the soil, and in addition to some contractor work that had been going in and around the area for the flood control projects. There is much more detail about those circumstances and whatnot in the document that I've put on your desk here on NDR. So not just Home Sweet Home, but a number of other projects are in here as well. And I'll just take a quick moment. It's not in the slide, but we did have Housing and Urban Development staff meet with us just this past week or so. And we had a very nice visit. They were here on a technical assistance visit for about a day and a half or so. We had the assistant director and also our grant program lead from HUD out of Denver join us, and we had great conversation about a number of different things. And so we're looking forward to continuing to advance our work with their assistance and whatnot. So some of that's also included in regards to updates on your form as well. As you know, we're deep into the budget. We have been making significant progress on the development of our budget. You'll know because you attended 3 of the 3 budget workshops we had this year. We appreciate very much your time and attention on those. What's happening right now is that we're meeting with the department heads. Most of that work's been done, but we still have a few department heads to meet with to go through their budgets. And finally then refine each of those budgets and put it into a consolidated budget, at which point then we'll review it one last time and scrub it. And that'll become the preliminary budget, which we'll present to you on August the 6th. So that is our deadline. From that, you'll have a number of weeks to go through and review the budget, and then we'll have a question and answer period whereby you can ask us anything about the budget or give us additional direction or whatnot. That'll occur on August the 28th. The President's budget or message about the budget is going to be due on September 4th. The first hearing is scheduled for September 18th with the final budget hearing on September 25th. So that's kind of the process by which we're operating under at this point in time. The International Economic Development Council, you might recall, visited with us in our community a number of months ago, and their final report is out. Thanks to Mr. Zakian, he's put together sort of an executive summary, which is a nice quick read as it relates to what was dominating the report in significance. Some of the main findings include what's on the slide here. There needs to be a major focus on strategy. We need to move to active and proactive leadership instead of reactive leadership, and I can second that. That's very frustrating. And then, of course, eliminating community silos, and even silos within organizations, like the city, for example. So these are not necessarily surprises to us, but they reaffirm some of the preliminary and discussions that we've had internally when we look critically at our own organization. Some of the strengths, and there were several, some of the 3 greatest strengths are that our community is ripe for growth, that we are a regional destination, and that we do have a diverse economy. So very good things. Our weaknesses include some areas focused on the downtown. That downtown closes early. It's essentially something that's been brought up by many folks in our community, and certainly the governor brought that up in his summit that he had earlier this year for not just Minot, but for, of course, downtowns across the state. Organizational fragmentation is also a weakness, and that's at a number of different organizations and a number of different levels within inside organizations. And then there's a lack of single leadership downtown. And that's something also that we've been aware of, but we want to make sure that we get time and attention on improving. Now, these aren't the only takeaways. There's a number of important and meaningful takeaways. I've just kind of picked 9 of the highlights for you. I encourage you to certainly review the Economic Resiliency Strategies Executive Summary. For those in the audience, we have copies of all these documents sitting up here on the table if you'd like to grab one. And certainly the primary document in the unedited format is a good read as well. Okay, Up next, wanted to talk a little bit about council orientation. This is something that I've struggled with a little bit in regards to finding time. And we were struggling a little bit because we didn't know how many new council members would be elected that we might have to orient. And so based on being completed with the election, and Alderman Pittler is our only newest council member. I've sat with him for, I don't know, maybe 2.5 hours this afternoon. We went through a orientation of sorts today. And of course, we may need to meet again depending upon how much maybe you retain and how many more questions you might have or whatnot. But essentially, I'm not planning to hold a widespread, formal council orientation at this point. All the rest of you are sort of seasoned professionals right now. But if you do have questions or concerns, please reach out to me. I'd love to meet with you and talk more about any questions you might have. Additionally, I will refer you to the council orientation handbook that you were all given last year. It has been updated, but not significantly. So your handbook from last year is pretty well, other than some name changes and things, pretty well in good order. So that's always a good source document for you. I think I mentioned this in the the important dates, but the Taxation Committee has invited me back to come and visit with them next week to talk a little bit more about taxes and tax finances, debt and debt servicing, and those types of things. So I'll be headed down to do that again later in the week, next week. And then we'll be meeting with the Energy Development and Transmission Committee shortly after, actually shortly before, to talk about the Hub City funding. As you know, we've been arguing for some time that not only is Minot a hub city, but that we've been heavily impacted by oil and gas, and we'd like to see a change in the formula. This seems to be fairly widely supported by the other jurisdictions that are involved, and so we're working collaboratively with those jurisdictions to come up with a funding formula that is reasonable, defensible, and as best as it can be fair and equitable for all the organizations that are impacted. With that, I wanted to take the opportunity with the change in leadership, and certainly the change in council after the election, to make a recommendation for you. I'd like to get your feedback on this. I've already talked with the staff about this. There seems to be a lot. I mean, obviously, my city manager reports, I can only get to you about maybe 10 to 20 minutes worth of information over the month that's gone on about things. And I don't do justice to each of the departments who have enormous, wonderful things that are going on that you should know more about. So I would like to recommend that department heads visit with you during the committee of the whole meetings and provide you a 10-minute or so, maybe 15-minute briefing on what it is they're actually been working on, what their accomplishments are, and what their challenges are. These conversations I envision to be at a high level, to not get in the weeds, but to just get you some better familiarity with what's going on in each of the departments at those department levels. The hope is to not sort of clog up city council meetings with that information, but instead provide it during the committee of the whole meetings. And the idea is to have one or two departments meet with you at each of the committee of the whole meetings, not every single department, right? So that way we kind of meter it out. We get one department essentially in front of you about once every 9 to 10 months or so. So I would love your feedback when I'm finished here or now if you have it in regards to advancing this initiative. I think it would be helpful for the community to know what's going on at a much deeper level inside our organization, and certainly for you as well, because you are inundated constantly with information. And it would give you an opportunity to ask questions of the department heads in and around what it is they're doing and why things are the way they are and those sorts of things. So that's the recommendation there for your consideration. I did want to touch quickly on the South Dakota versus Wayfair Supreme Court ruling. This is great news for North Dakota, and I do have to say I'm very impressed with our state legislature because they preemptively developed state code that sort of hoped or maybe foresaw this ruling, and because of that positions the state to collect on these sales taxes from online purchases very, very quickly. Now what that will do to us, of course, because of the ruling at the at the Supreme Court, That'll allow for the state to collect sales taxes, which will increase state aid back to the city. But it'll also allow us, hopefully, to collect sales taxes from our local sales tax, and that we also expect to increase revenues too. So some of that's being, a little bit more discussed and worked out. There is nothing for us to do at this point in time as it relates to getting involved. The state's taking the lead on this, and there is a mandate to have all of these collections take place by October 1st of this year. Many of the big retailers have already started to comply earlier than that, so we're already starting to see sales tax revenues at the state level be collected, which is great news for us. So again, one of those things we talked about in our budget workshops, that maybe this will have an impact positively on the revenue streams for us, and that is the expectation at this point, but we don't know exactly what that means in regards to how much revenue. So we're following that closely. I wanted to update you on the Community Development Director position and sort of just a general planning department update. It's been a few months since I've talked with you about this. We did conduct a national search for some time to look for candidates for the Community Development Director position. There were a number of candidates that applied. Those candidate lists were weeded down to around 9, which then was weeded to 5, which was then weeded down to 3. So mid-July or so, we'll be bringing in the top 3 candidates and conducting panelist interviews with them. We'll also take them on a tour, and then finally I'll have an interview with them as well. So we do hope that hopefully by the end of this month we'll be able to announce potentially who it is that we're interested in, if the process goes well, or alternatively we may need to come back with you and make a different recommendation. But that's the hope at this point. We are grateful for Prothman's help, which is a national search firm who have helped us essentially put this list together and do the preliminary screening. So in the planning department, in the interim, we have been running very, very lean. We've had a number of important positions in the planning department that have been and remained vacant. I do want to give a great big shout out to Lance Lang, who has been acting as our interim planning director, along with the help of Lance Meyer, who's been dealing a lot with the administrative activities. Both of them have done a fine, fine job in helping to keep the planning department intact during this time period. We have some good news. We did hire an administrative assistant because our administrative assistant did leave the city at the 1st of June or so, and she's being trained up, or will be trained up here pretty quick. And we also have an intern that joined us for a couple months out of, I think, California Polytech, if I'm not mistaken. And she'll be here for 2-3 months as well. So we have just the director position and the assistant planner position to fill. And once we do that, we'll be fully staffed in the planning department. So I want to thank again the leadership of both Lance Meyer and Lance Lang, as well as the patience of the community in their applications and interactions with the planning department as well. One bit of good news, I know during the election there was a lot of discussion about automation and improvements for software and so on and so forth. And it's not all doom and gloom. We have been making improvements where we can. We have initiated, as of mid-month last month, the automated vehicle locator system. This provides GPS mapping of the exact location of emergency vehicles throughout the community and allows us to do essentially proximity-based dispatching. So that way we know where a car is, we know where the incident is, and we can match the two up if possible. Also, it's a safety enhancement to the city because it allows for a non-responsive emergency vehicle to be identified in its location, and in the event we need to send backup or send help, we'll know exactly where that vehicle is. So this is another great advancement for our community. This is being utilized by not just our own dispatch office, but fire and police department, ward, county, and community ambulance. So they're all talking to one another now, which is really great. And they've talked with one another before, but this way they can do it graphically on a GIS map. So that's pretty interesting. With that, I'll stop for questions that you might have. I'll encourage, I didn't touch on anything on construction-related activities. That's because it's in your pamphlet here. I'll just save the time of council and refer you back to that document. So that's all I have for now, unless you have questions for me.
Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Barney, or Mayor Sitma, apologies.
Old habits are hard to break.
I guess so. Mr. Barry, I just wanted to touch on a couple things. One, I greatly appreciate everybody's work on the high water initiative. I know that goes back even to our Vista volunteers before they left us early in the year. That's an idea that's been floated around town since going back to 2011. And I know the flood is at times very difficult to remember, but it's an event that we can't forget. And these signs, I think, are an appropriate way to keep the threat relevant in our minds. So I just wanted to share that. I also appreciate the recommendation to develop a department head report. I think these meetings are a great opportunity for us to share the city's operations. So with that in mind, I would move the city manager's recommendation that we add 2 monthly department head reports to the committee of the whole meetings.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Wolski, second by Straight on this. Any discussion from the council? I don't know if we would need a motion on this, but seeing as it's been up there, we'll move forward with it. If not, call the roll.
Wolski?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
Anything further, Mr. Wolski? If not, I'll just take a moment here as well to recognize the High Water Initiative. If many of us remember looking out these windows 7 years ago, this week that water would have been flowing right down on the levee that was protecting the library and Broadway, and I personally placed that high water mark myself on the corner of 4th Avenue and 7th Street Northwest in August of 2011, and I had told Lance Meyer that if I have to pay for it myself, I'll buy one of those signs in a standard and have them put it up back in the corner back there. But I can't say thank you enough, and I think even looking farther down the road as we get flood control built in some of the main areas, potentially a monument that I think is long overdue, but also in the light of all of the financial situations that we've run through, we can certainly explore that to private funding down the road. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mayor Sitma. Mr. Barry, I just wanted to comment a little bit about the attendance at SRJB. I appreciate the job you have to do. I appreciate Mr. Jonason's work over the last couple of years. It might be an emotional response for me, and that's why I'm going to be very supportive moving forward at trying to get our delegation here to meet and talk in advance of possibly meeting with the SRJB. I'll tell you, from my 2 years of taking time out of my day to go to Bismarck, to listen to the State Water Commission, to be present for the city of Minot, I'm concerned about some growing tension there, and I'm also concerned about the communication of those of us that have been at those meetings for a couple of years and had to add comment. And I recognize on a statewide level that there's been a lot of fracturing on the east side of the state, and for those of us that, yes, the city of Minot is paying a large share, we've been very supportive of the basin-wide concept. I think we want to continue to be. I think we recognize the huge financial challenges ahead, but I'm mindful also of the tension that grows and the appearance of these guys are saying one thing, here we are talking about something else. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and that we have to kind of strike not just the delicate balance, but we have to be educated. Mr. Pittner's got to get up to speed on it as well, and we have to meet with those folks to provide a very thoughtful discussion moving forward, because as you know, Tom, I live on the east side of Minot, and we don't want to have any holdups to the plan. So I appreciate your hard work on that. I just wanted to bring that sentiment forward. So thanks.
Any further questions for City Manager? Thank you, Tom.
Great, thank you.
Number 9 on our agenda tonight is the attorney report.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me. Mr. Mayor and members of council, I submitted a written report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the attorney?